Engineers mock a black janitor's daughter. She shocks them all by reviving an engine dead for a decade. They sneered before she even touched a wrench. A young black girl, the daughter of a janitor, dared to stand in front of a group of seasoned engineers and offer help on a machine declared dead for 10 long years. The men chuckled, exchanging smug glances, convinced this was nothing more than a child playing pretend. To them, she was invisible, unworthy of respect, incapable of brilliance. But what happened next would silence their laughter, rewrite the meaning of expertise, and prove that greatness often comes from the places society least expects. In a sprawling industrial complex, a massive diesel engine sat gathering dust. Once the pride of the factory, it had powered machines for decades, until one catastrophic breakdown left it cold and silent. Teams of engineers had attempted repair after repair, but no matter how many hours, tools, or calculations they invested, the engine refused to roar back to life. Eventually, it was written off as beyond repair, a monument to failure parked in the corner of the workshop. It was in this same factory that Samuel, the janitor, worked tirelessly. For years, he swept floors, emptied bins, and polished the very tools the engineers used. His daughter, Maya, often waited for him after school, sitting quietly with a notebook, watching the workers. She admired their confidence, their authority, the way they carried themselves. But she also noticed how they looked down on her father, never calling him by his name, only the janitor. Maya was curious, though. While the engineers dismissed her presence, she would sketch diagrams, read manuals discarded in the trash, and listen carefully to their conversations. Over time, she absorbed details about engines, hydraulics, and mechanics like a sponge. To her, the abandoned diesel engine wasn't just a broken machine, it was a challenge, whispering that it still had a chance. But when Maya approached the engineers one day, timidly suggesting she might know a way to fix it, their response wasn't encouragement. It was mockery. They laughed, shaking their heads, asking who she thought she was. Just a janitor's daughter. The laughter stung, but Maya didn't flinch. Behind their jeers, she recognized fear, the kind that masks insecurity. These men had tried and failed. The thought that a teenage girl, and worse in their eyes, a black janitor's daughter, could succeed where they hadn't, was unthinkable. Their arrogance blinded them to possibility. Maya remembered nights spent beside her father's toolbox, tracing the grooves of old manuals he'd saved from the scrapyard. Samuel had never been given the chance to study engineering, though he had a natural gift for mechanics. Instead, he worked in silence, unnoticed, while others received praise for lesser skills. Maya promised herself she would not be invisible like her father. She studied the engine carefully. Rust crusted its joints, seals were cracked, and parts of its wiring looked like a bird's nest. Yet in her notes, she'd mapped out its design, realizing that one overlooked component, a corroded fuel delivery system, was at the heart of its silence. Every fix the engineers attempted had been cosmetic, addressing symptoms, not the root. When she voiced this theory, the men doubled over with laughter. "Impossible!" one scoffed. Another muttered, "Stay in school, little girl." But she refused to back down. Instead, she waited until the workshop was nearly empty, her father sweeping quietly in the corner, and began working. Her hands shook as she dismantled the clogged lines, cleaned each piece with precision, and reassembled the system with a steadiness that came from hours of secret practice on smaller machines. Samuel watched with pride, but said nothing. He knew the power of silence, of letting actions speak louder than words. Days passed and whispers spread. Some mocked her persistence, others dismissed her as wasting time. Yet Maya remained undeterred. Her fingertips grew raw, grease stained her clothes, but her determination only hardened. She wasn't just fixing an engine, she was confronting generations of prejudice, proving that brilliance could not be confined by race, status, or gender. Finally, the day came when she tightened the last bolt, wiped sweat from her brow, and stood back. The engine loomed before her, silent but no longer defeated. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the ignition. For a moment, there was nothing. The silence was deafening, and the engineers watching from the sidelines smirked, ready to pounce on her failure. One of them muttered, "Told you so." But then, a cough, a sputter, and the faintest tremor rippled through the engine. Maya's heart pounded. She adjusted the throttle, her hands steady despite the electricity coursing through her veins. The engine roared to life. The sound was thunderous, shaking the workshop walls, sending vibrations through the very floor. Dust fell from beams overhead. Tools rattled on their hooks, and every sneer on the engineers' faces evaporated in an instant. Their eyes widened in disbelief, jaws slack as the machine they had abandoned now growled with renewed power. Maya stood there, chest rising and falling, her face streaked with sweat and grease. In that moment, she wasn't a janitor's daughter. She wasn't just a black girl in a workshop of doubters. She was an engineer in her own right, one who had achieved what an entire team of experts could not. The laughter that had haunted her was replaced by stunned silence. One engineer dropped his clipboard. Another whispered, How did she do it?" But Maya didn't answer. She simply looked at her father, whose eyes glistened with pride, and together they understood. The world had just witnessed something undeniable. News of Maya's success spread quickly through the factory, and soon beyond its walls. What began as ridicule became reluctant respect, then admiration. The same men who mocked her now studied her notes, realizing she had seen what they had overlooked for a decade, yet Maya didn't crave their approval. What mattered was the shift, proof that brilliance cannot be confined by the color of one's skin or by the job title of one's parents. She had inherited her father's quiet genius, nurtured it, and dared to let it shine. In doing so, she shattered the walls of prejudice, if only for a moment, forcing those who laughed at her to confront their own bias. For Samuel, it was more than a triumph. For years, he had been invisible, reduced to a title, the janitor. Now, through his daughter, his unspoken legacy had roared into life just like that engine. Maya's story became an inspiration, especially to those told they don't belong in rooms of power. She proved that skill, intelligence, and resilience have no labels. What mattered was persistence, courage, and the refusal to believe in limits imposed by others. And so the once-dead engine became more than a machine. It became a symbol of possibility, of justice, of the brilliance hidden in those society chooses not to see. The question that remained, echoing beyond the factory walls, was simple. How many other Mayas are out there, waiting for a chance to prove the world wrong? If only someone would let them try.